What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we are doing my 1111th video of all time cornerback deep dive. Super excited for this one. I actually had two videos that were going to put up yesterday, and the files corrupted. And you know what? I was really pissed off about it. It ends up being that this is going to be my 1111th video. So maybe it was all for a reason. Super excited for this. My favorite position to grade. And it's the first deep dive of the season. We have top players at all the positions for the upcoming draft already out. So check those out. So you'll be seeing some repeats, but this is over double the size of that first list. So I'm going to get a lot more players in here and a lot of guys who I really do like. But let's get right into this. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Use that link tree. That's the easiest way to do it. All of my socials are right there. Twitter, I post all 22 tape, and it basically describes everything I'm talking about here. So, gonna get super excited for that. Again, feel free to use that UnderDog code as well. You get a 50% match on your first deposit. They don't require me to shout them out. They're just a great company. I use it in my free time when I want to be able to have a little more skin in the game. So if you have the money, are legal, want to have a little extra skin in the game, it's a great way to do so. They're honestly it's a really good app as well. But go to that link tree, use that top link, and it'll put all that information in for you. Make it a lot easier. Sends me $60 full transparency. But let's get right to the actual video content with the grading scale. And because you guys need to know how I grade these players, right? So I actually did change it up from the first video. Yeah, I decided that there were some gimme categories I wasn't very, very proud of. Not like I wasn't proud of, but I didn't think it actually needed to have the weight that it did. For frame, for example, there are corners that can survive at smaller sizes, and I don't really think that a larger corner is necessarily a better corner. So I allowed frame to essentially be cannibalized into man coverage and ball skills. Like, that wasn't really something, because a lot of it is ball production. How many times are you targeted? And it's not very easy to quantify, but like a good ball hawk can be factored into the it factor category. So I ended up taking that out and putting it into zone. So I basically just made corner position more heavily focused on whether you can cover a player. It makes sense, right? But that's something that you guys know about me. If you've been following me for a while, I do like to change it up a little. But yes, how I grade it, it's not going to be just a 1 to 100 scale. It's also going to be tiers, and it is based on the 1 to 100 scale, but it gives you context. I think that 80 and above is cornerback 1 tier, and 75 and above usually is a starter. So a corner 2 is going to be a starter. So 75 to 80 is corner 2, 80 and above is a corner 1. Of course, technically 90 and above is generational. Like, usually I keep it as like generational, blue chip, starter, fringe, etc. But for this, I ended up changing up a little bit. 75 down to 70. That's flex. So someone who will be getting some reps in there, here and there. And then tier 4 is the developmental guys. Probably not going to get many reps, if any, in the first year. There'll be maybe guys who can get called up in case of injury or, late game situations. But they're guys who you want to have in your roster and you want to develop them over time. Some of them could be practice squad depending on how good or bad they are. So I think that context is key. But how I actually grade them on the 1 to 100 scale, I look at like man coverage. Obviously, it's very holistic grading. It's very simplistic. Are you effective in man coverage? It takes a long time to get comfortable, feeling comfortable with your ability to just take a holistic grade rather than breaking it down to more and more and more little pieces. So, yeah, I mean, it is relatively basic, but at the same time, I'm trying to make content for you guys, and, breaking it down into 1,000 categories also is over analyzing. Sometimes football is just football, right? But man coverage is a blend of reaction timing, change of direction, and essentially instincts. Like, it really is a balance of that. And, some guys just can't do that. Some guys are just a lot better in space and zone coverage. They're very good at being able to process what's going on around them, and they thrive on being able to predict the play rather than react to the play. So a lot of guys are a lot better in zone coverage. Athleticism is great. I mean, obviously, you need that for every single corner position. Maybe for zone coverage, though, you might be focusing more on the explosiveness rather than the speed. But athleticism is a holistic category. Change of direction is super key as well, because guys who are very stiff just don't really do too well when we have these route runners that are getting better and better. Instincts, talked about it a little bit earlier. Essentially, do you know what's going on around you? And it could even be as simple as, do you know when the team is running the ball? Like, it's not just coverage instincts. It is the whole game. Because if you're just running down the field because you have no idea what run's going on behind you, you've effectively taken yourself out of the play. So it does actually matter. Physicality is key as well. I mean, wide receivers are very physical. If you cannot handle someone trying to get a little aggressive and like pushing off of you, because we all know there's a battle every single play between these corners and receivers nowadays. Like it's crucial. It's crucial to be able to handle that physicality. Run support, it's a super small factor. It's a factor of 5%, but it is something that matters, right? Like, are you somebody who is going to basically be a liability? Or can you actually add a little extra value as a more balanced run supporter? It factor is basically how I ended up cannibalizing both ball skills as well as frame, and ended up allowing that to basically be my checks and balances. I could do plus or minus 5, but I don't think anybody got to that. Well, one person got to that 5 mark. So we'll get to that in a second, but most of the time it's negative. I don't like giving guys artificially positive boosts. Like, I just feel like my grading scale is pretty indicative of being able to give you that positive boost. But let's get right into this. Dream fits, don't take them too seriously. Starting out with my number 27 corner. So yes, first list is 13. This is 27. This is a big surprise because y'all know how much I love Penn State DBs. Cam Miller. So he's a little smaller, a little bit of itty bitty guy there, 182, but 182 on its own is not bad, right? It's the fact that he really does play a little bit more thin. And just for time's sake, I am going to take a little bit less holistic analysis and do exactly what I've started to do with all of my top grading scales. It's read my actual scouting report from a game. And this is just a play-by-play live reaction. So you're going to be able to live react with me essentially through my notes. So for Cam Miller, we'll look at my game that I watched of his versus Ole Miss. So it was his one start of the year, but he did take reps every game. Just this was the one where he was the instant starter. So again, remember, sometimes I'll contradict myself in my notes, but you are watching a game with me. You're watching Ole Miss with me. So I said he's kind of smaller, but only a boundary, and this is a killer game to watch versus NFL talent. There's a lot of really good talent for receivers at Ole Miss, so I really did like it. I said, not gonna lie, he got cooked in this game for 120 yards. It was his lowest graded game. Would hope for a better performance statistically. Which, again, it's his first starting game. It's understandable why you might fail, but at the same time, it is what it is. So his first rep, he looked a little bit fluid. He had a nice bailout. He had good recovery after letting up a little inside separation and low-pointed interception. So, inward breaking route, gave up a little separation, ended up rebounding, ended up getting the interception right there, which is great. So I ended up saying he's giving up inside separation easily with slower reaction to slants. That's something you'll see the entire game. That's why change of direction and instincts are a little bit lower. It's not in every play that he has absolute crap change of direction, but the fact is it pairs with instincts because of the fact that you need to react to change your direction, and it just doesn't always work out that way. Regardless, back to the notes. I said, I swear Penn State corners all suck at covering slants unless you put them on inside shade. That's very true. He got beaten again by a slant. Learned, and he ended up getting a pass breakup on another slant, so that's something that's a big positive for me, being able to watch guys learn. Unfortunately, that was not the case. He only learned once, and then he ended up going back to his old self. Guys like Joey Porter Jr. I fell in love with because they learned as the game went on and did not make the same mistake as the game progressed. So I was hoping for that for him, but didn't end up being that way. It's a little stiff transition from running backwards to recovering in zone coverage. He gave up separation on a deep fade for a big gain. He wasn't in an awful position, but it looks like his top speed might be more capped than it initially seemed. His feet have gotten heavier, so he changes direction slower than he did earlier in the game, but he didn't. Apparently, there's no notes on it that he hurt himself, so it doesn't look like he actually hurt himself. I thought that might have been a reason, and it didn't. Blinders on does not seem to process the run well when in man-to-man. He needs to look at the ball. He should have had way more pass breakups or interceptions if he just learned to look at the ball rather than just go willy-nilly versus the receiver. That is a direct quote. Man, his change of directions awful at full speed. And I said, dog, play the fucking ball. All caps. I got very frustrated when I watched him because of the fact that he just wouldn't turn his head around. I mean, who gives a shit if you're in good position if you're not actually making a play for the ball? And even though he wasn't actually in great position all the time, but he just still would never play the ball. And that's why guys were absolutely mossing him, and that's why he gave up 120 yards. Fades with outside releases are lethal. Lord help my man. So yeah, he got absolutely dominated that way. Dog celebrated a should-be touchdown on a fade for not working after getting feasted on. Basically, that's something I also don't like. I've watched the Steelers for a long time. Our DBs randomly love to like flex when they almost gave up a touchdown and the receiver is the reason it wasn't a touchdown. It is what it is, but it's something I really don't like. He was able to help versus a swing route, so that's cool, I guess. My goodness, help my brother. Bro got humiliated on a curl and turned up field for a run after the catch and got taken out for the rest of the game. So really embarrassing, honestly. But Cam Miller, he does have those flashes of athleticism there. If he ends up learning to play the ball better, then he will actually be able to at least, be more viable as a corner. But right now, he is certainly going to be on the lower end of the totem pole in terms of being able to be on a roster. Of course, with 26 other corners ahead of him, I think you made that. I think you guys can infer that. Terrence Brooks is the next corner I'm talking about. He is formerly from Texas, and he transferred to Illinois. So Illinois is a great place to transfer. They have a really good squad. I'm going to be studying one of their slot cornerbacks, forgetting his name off the top of my head, for my DB deep dive, which is not going to be next. My next is going to be wide receivers. But we'll give you some quick notes from one of the games I watched of his, which was versus Washington. It was his worst graded game, so keep that in mind as well. He got beat on a double move that he was not in a bad spot for, but he just did not have the recovery speed to get there. He has poor change of direction, which also contributed to him being out of position on certain reps. He's a bit stiff, but he does like to use physicality. Interesting how that reflects in my grading scale. I'm telling you, these are my notes, and they're not really meant for you guys to hear, but at this point, you guys don't care. You guys find it fun to be able to watch it with me. If you don't, you can literally just pause it and then look at the grades and then continue skipping on. That's kind of the whole entire point of this, but I digress. He did not stay active after giving up separation, leading to a play extension and a big gain. Essentially, Penix he ended up giving up some separation because of the fact he kind of stopped playing during the play, and Michael Penix was able to continue letting the play develop and ended up leading to a big gain. Not a huge fan of that at all. Probably should have been a -1, but it still would have kept him in the same position. But regardless, he did not cover his deep third very well at all. Off-man is the only system I can see him working in, and he continued to get subbed out because of the fact that he was just not consistently effective on the field. So unfortunate there, but Terrence Brooks is far from an awful corner because of the fact that there is a system that he works well in, and he is 6'2", 210. He's more of an enforcer, and I love the fact that, at least there is a system that works, and his physicality matches his physical profile. And Illinois is a great place to be able to develop and learn. Texas, not so much. So he's actually taking a step up in terms of DB prowess, and I do love that for him. Hoping the best for Terrence Brooks, but at the moment, a little bit one-dimensional. And I'm hoping, again, we'll see what happens, but maybe he'll have to be a box safety or something, add a little bit more weight, but time will tell. Mansour Delane. So we're going to be doing, fun fact, I'm going to just spoil it. We're doing the VT corners back-to-back. And luckily, I'm going to talk about the same game, which is Florida State. And I'll say this right now, Dorian Strong had a lot more notes than Mansour Delane. And, Delane, to be fair, is, he just wasn't very noteworthy. So just bear with me. It's going to be a quick read. But, of course, we got all these corners to go through. So I watched him versus Florida State. It said it's not a badly graded game, but he played against great receivers, and that's why it actually did matter to me. It's also why I really focused on that for Dorian Strong. He has poor identification ability versus the run, almost as if his run supports the D+. He had a nice pass breakup versus Johnny Wilson. That's cool. He has better movement skills than Dorian, so spoiler alert for that. And he ended up being extremely versatile. He played in the slot, he played free safety, and he played on the boundary. I did like that about him, which is why I think that I ended up kind of not giving any pluses or minuses, but would have been one of those spots where maybe I felt a little bit comfortable with a plus. And I do think he could be in the market to be in that free safety category, but I do think that he's not necessarily great as a pure safety. But there were some corners that ended up being subbed in, and he ended up having to play as that deep safety a lot more, and it was certainly interesting. But his shoulders are pointed too far ahead of the receiver, allowing for easy undercuts. He might be able to play off man better than anything else. He just looks very uncomfortable in zone. So the only reason that he could potentially be a deep safety is because he's not a bad athlete, and when you're in a deep, like if you're in the deep middle, like you're going to be a deep third, you don't have that much ground to cover versus maybe a corner is a little bit more in terms of like having to like lock your shit down because there's less room for error. But regardless, Mansour is also pretty damn small, 6'1", 180. I did debate giving him a -1 for that, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really make a difference between it could be a 59.5. Who gives a shit? But at the end of the day, Mansour is a good athlete. It's a good school for corners to develop in. I just do have my concerns because he just does feel so uncomfortable in open space. Now we'll talk about Dorian. So same game. Let's talk about it. It was his worst graded game. He ended up getting pushed off by Keon Coleman, did not recover, but he was willing to go like band for band. I said strength for strength. He was, more than fine trying his best to be able to at least match that physicality. Usually loses that battle, unfortunately, though. Of course, they have this MF wearing number 4, or they have an MF wearing 4, which actually Mansour Delane, I think, was wearing 4 that game, and he's wearing 44. So I love it. That's just me complaining in my notes. But I say he's pointing to others when he's in zone coverage, i.e. he's basically telling other players to get in their own positions. I'm a big fan of that. Could have been a +1 if I wanted to. He had nice pursuit to push out Jordan Travis. That's cool. That was his only good play versus the run. He plays on both sides of the ball. Or not the ball, but the line of scrimmage. So he plays left cornerback and right. That is something that is worth noting. Because some guys are very side-specific, and he was not. Solid awareness while he is in zone. He really struggles versus stronger receivers because he wants to go toe-to-toe, and he loses the physical battle. Keon Coleman did get very underrated. That was something I noted, and I ended up putting on my Twitter. He's not a high-end athlete, but he's not a bad one. C is an adequate grade for me. Just keep that in mind. It's not... I prefer to be a little bit more overcritical than over-lovey, because I don't think many players are superstars in the NFL, and the superstars should be graded like superstars. I digress. He's been having a hard time when he does get targeted in man coverage, which sucks. And then I said he flashes some instincts in zone, but he still has his slip-ups. He's having to grab to slow the receiver down when he ends up making his big mistakes, and he ended up getting subbed out as the game went on because Florida State ended up mollywopping him. So just a little bit underwhelming, but if you look at the grades, pretty much everything is adequate, so it's worth taking a swing on him. Like, you have the more exciting player in Mansour, who's going to be that higher-end athlete and good in man coverage, and Dorian is just that guy who's super high floor. So curious to see which one gets valued more come draft day, but next we're going to talk about Tyreek Chappell. Texas A&M corner. Could have ended up tossing in another. There's actually a couple Texas A&M corners. 2 of them I have in this, but the third one I debated. Former UNC corner, forgetting his name off the top of my head, but ended up studying them all nonetheless. But let's talk about Tyreek's game versus Alabama. He seems to get hurt mid-game a lot. He was randomly getting subbed out like after a rep or 2 into certain series. And the fact is, if that's my first note about him, not a good start. He has solid patience in off-man coverage. He's ditched his deep threat to guard a curl, and he got exposed for it, i.e. the receiver ended up being targeted because he ended up bailing on his coverage. I love the idea of being assertive, but don't be an idiot at the same time. He gives separation in normal man coverage, but he's solid in off-man. I wish there were more press reps to be able to see his physicality. His north-south change of direction is not great. So, i.e. if he's moving backwards, having to transition to go forwards, he doesn't do a great job. He looks very stiff in zone coverage. He actually might be in that 4.37 speed range, though. So keep that in mind. He's not awful versus the run, but he's also not great, i.e. adequate. So, quick little notes there for him. Regardless, like, he's somebody that's going to be off-man specific, and the fact that he ends up trying to be assertive but does it in the wrong way gives me some concern. Like, not everybody's Marcus Peters, not everybody's Renardo Green. So luckily he is someone who's going to be very fast in a straight line. I didn't think he was overly explosive, hence why his athleticism is a B+, more than, in that A- to A tier. But overall, Tyreek Chappell still worth taking a shot on. He is a little bit smaller though at 5'11", and 185 is fine weight, but that 5'11 spot, you might start trying to think of him as an off-man slot corner. Now let's talk about Fentrell Cypress. He was formerly 13. He was the last of the initial group of guys, which, I mean, that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Fentrell Cypress is a very, very seasoned corner. I think he's formerly UVA as well, Virginia. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good school to be able to grow and develop in. And I just simply need to find his scouting report here. But regardless, I mean, I ended up going more in depth with Fentrell. The bottom line is he was extremely underwhelming. That was my biggest takeaway. I was just very underwhelmed by his overall game. And like, it just never got much better because he just was a little bit of an underwhelming athlete. So here it is. It's actually pretty sad. His notes are 2 lines long for 2 games. Like, that's how unnoteworthy this man is. He's just stiff. That was like, I said he was good at evading blocks. He's stiff. He ends up allowing outside releases, and he gets out-physicaled by physical receivers. Genuinely a noteworthy list player. It's unfortunate, but the fact is he's stiff. And usually guys who are stiff can use physicality to at least, change up, like knock those shifty receivers off their routes. Can't do that. Luckily, he can play some zone coverage. That's solid. You got those field instincts in there. And if you can evade blocks, at least you can try to help in run support. But he's just not overall actually putting like toe to turf in that. It's great that you can evade a block, but actually make a tackle. So Fentrell Cypress, we'll keep it short and sweet because he's like, you can go back and watch the first video on him anyways. But I want to get to more of the entertaining guys here. You got Tommy Hill, which was one of my last studies. And Tommy Hill is a really fun corner to watch. He was somebody who, he ended up being, I think he's played both sides of the ball as well. I know that I saw some reports on him that were glowingly positive. He's somebody that, I'm forgetting the name of the coach right now, but former Carolina Panthers head coach. He ended up being a huge fan of Tommy Hill, and he's somebody that even when they're trying to sub him out, he gets pissed. So I do love that mentality. That's why I gave him a 1+. But this is his notes versus Michigan. So something I did note about him as well from his statistics, he dominated versus Purdue. So that's cool. He ends up looking at the quarterback for cues. So he ends up having some high instinct grades because of the fact he's more so looking at the quarterback for when they're throwing rather than the receiver, because the play will develop. Of course, that could end up being detrimental to corners that, are against very good quarterbacks who know how to manipulate corners with their eyes, but I digress. He's like I said, bro is on it with his IQ, or else he's having luck that he bails properly. He was actually doing a really good job at identifying the quarterback's moves. So he ended up getting hurt, or he ended up being just subbed out. Nebraska's weird, but I ended up doing some more research. He ended up not being hurt, but it's just weird how they sub out like their best corner. It's mind-boggling to me, but I digress. So he was out until halftime. Those were his notes from the first half. The rest of the game is far more noteworthy, though. So he has nice patience versus Colston Loveland. He did get pushed back, which, I mean, to be fair, Colston Loveland's 45 pounds heavier or 50 pounds heavier. So that's okay. But he still ends up, that's why his physicality grade's a C. Let's see. So he's physical. He reacted to a throw over a route showing less blinders than other DBs. Blinders, if you guys will hear about this with Jabbar Muhammad, of course, but basically you are locked in on your assignment and don't really care about anything else. I digress, though. He needs to be more precise when firing his hands in press coverage because they missed, and he ends up having to catch up. It looks like he had an ankle injury, but the dude is not listed as being injured. His change of direction seemed to get much poorer as the game went on. That's why I thought maybe he was dealing with something, but no reports ended up having that. So it is what it is. Top speed appears to be capped because receivers are getting vertical separation. He was pushed off by Loveland again. He needs to remain tight rather than trying to win a strength battle. Sounds familiar. Nice job to be patient versus the run and ended up stopping a potentially bigger play. He saw a seam developing, so he ended up reacting to it. His top speed or lack thereof was exposed on a drag route. That's the easiest way to see if a defensive back has actual speed. They'll end up giving up ground on drag routes, and it's pretty obvious. You'll see them pretty much running in a straight line together. Overall, not as impressed as I was hoping for. So again, somebody who's very, very well balanced. I'm hoping that maybe there was some ankle tweak in there in that he was just trying to play on it. But again, none of the notes ended up saying that. So we will see about that. Aiden White is next. He's an interesting study. Watch his game versus Clemson. So we'll talk about it here. But it's one of those players that, there's a clip on my Twitter. You guys can go check it out. It's pretty embarrassing how much separation he can give up in terms of the speed battle. But I said he had a nice break on a curl and pass break. Ended up having a pass break up there. He has really solid change of direction. He has solid strength with his pop, with jam at the line of scrimmage. Ended up not being consistent enough, unfortunately. He tends to lag behind on drag routes. Oh, very, very interesting note there. Solid impress. I don't know about off man. Solid break, but he did take an extra step before changing directions. So that was why he didn't end up getting an A or more. Whoa, just got blown. Just got blown by and showed a real lack of speed. So that's the clip on my Twitter, by the way. He ended up slipping, or his tackle attempt ended up being slipped, and that's unfortunately why he didn't get a very good run support grade. He ended up missing a couple tackles. He ended up giving ground deep, and he's really top speed limited. Oh no, he's a fluid mover, just not fast. And number 7 on NC State's the better corner based on my first glance. So, he's somebody who I kind of delegated as more of a slot potential because of the fact that, he's more fluid. Like that's pretty much it. I'm a little bit worried because Aiden White, he's a smart player who's fluid, but when you just can't move and you're 190 pounds, there's just not that much more room for that to be improved. We'll see what happens though with him, but we'll leave it right there. Ricardo Hallman, gonna be again one of those. I might not even read my notes on him because of the fact that we already did a video that broke him down much more in depth. The bottom line with Ricardo is the fact that he's never moving at full speed. I just do not see him actually trying at all. And when it's in man coverage, it's almost impossible to beat this guy because he is extremely fluid. We're talking about somebody who looks as if they're a professional hockey skater, being able to change directions and just move in all directions so fluidly. And he's a big hitter. He knows how to jam at the line of scrimmage. But the one thing is he just stands in an area rather than, guarding the receivers in his designated area. And that's why I gave him such a low zone grade. Just bottom line, I was not a super big fan of Ricardo Hallman. Again, I have a whole entire video out on the top corners that breaks him down more in full there. But let's talk about Will Lee. Let's do that. Will Lee's a fun player to watch. He's a big player, but he doesn't weigh that much, but he ends up playing like he weighs a little bit more than what his weight suggests. He's a transfer to Texas A&M, so that's cool. Kansas State corner. I like Kansas State, so I was a little biased right there. But regardless, Will Lee, this is his notes versus the game versus Texas. I ended up saying he's a Texas A&M transfer from Kansas State. He's willing to go into the box. He could even be a safety if he wants to transfer. He's mostly on the line of scrimmage. They actually put him as an edge rusher. Super weird. I don't know what they were doing, but is what it is. He has a good motor. He's just not really effective. There's a weird corner rotation there at Kansas State, which, if they're putting him on the line of scrimmage, should kind of tell you that anyways. He has solid length with his arms, and his rep versus Xavier Worthy in the slot that I ended up posting on my Twitter ended up ending in a pass breakup. So that was actually very nice. But that was probably one of the only plays athletically that I really did enjoy what he had. But I want to like him more in off man. It's just, but it is not like he is locking dudes down. He's just tackling afterwards. So, he's going to be someone who I'm very intrigued to see if he takes a step up. Texas A&M doesn't do a very good job of developing DBs the way that I wish that he went to Illinois rather than Terrence Brooks. This is a guy who I think could have ended up being there. The bottom line is there was one good rep that game. That was the one I just talked about versus Xavier Worthy. And I watched every corner that had a Texas game. I watched their game versus Texas. Just to see apples to apples, watching first-round quality receivers versus these players. And that's what you're facing in the NFL. So, Will Lee, though, I do love that frame. 6'3", 185 smaller, but 6'3" is a great way to start because, you know, it's not like he's actually bad in terms of change of direction. I'm just hoping that the top speed doesn't get to him. But physicality and instincts, those are two key categories to have. If you're 6'3", you need to be physical. And then it's a huge plus if you actually know what the heck's going on. So big win right there. Woody Washington is next. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about both these OU corners back-to-back as well. Shout out to, I'm forgetting who shouted out on Twitter, but I ended up actually asking for who else I should watch, and somebody was very adamant about me watching Woody Washington. And I was like, okay. And guess what game I ended up watching of his? Texas. So I ended up saying he's sub 6 foot. He's a 5th-year senior. He ended up having a nice block shed and tackle attempt. He had nice coverage versus Xavier Worthy on a deep out. He kind of got destroyed by Adonai Mitchell in off-man coverage, though. He doesn't like to go into the box, which is directly opposite of Gentry Williams, which is funny because Gentry's the smaller guy. I digress. He has good patience in the run game and an open field. Really good tackler. Do not put this dude in off-man coverage because he ends up getting shredded. Not great in off-zone either. Just gives up too much room. He's just not very fluid. He did not get enough deep. He didn't get deep enough in his zone assignment, but he does have some awareness of what's going on around him. He flashes some deep speed when he's pretty much able, like based on the fact that he was able to essentially keep up with Xavier Worthy. So that's why I gave him that B- in athleticism, because it just popped up very, very rarely. He's just not a good mover apart from running in a straight line. He ended up calling out a couple assignments to other defenders, which is cool. And he ended up having a solid recovery versus Worthy that I posted on my Twitter account. So there is some positives here. I mean, the fact is he's somebody who's 5'11", 195, who has straight line speed and can actually be physical and help out in the run. He doesn't like to go into the box, which I'm not a fan of, but at the end of the day, you don't need to have everybody in the box. Sometimes you want to have someone who's reliable in case the run gets outside of your primary run defenders. And I do like that about Woody Washington. If you keep him in cover 4, I think this dude actually might be an absolute baller because he does have that deep speed and he doesn't necessarily need to, in that situation, fully use his change of direction ability. And, you know, maybe you can jam guys at the line of scrimmage. If a run play comes, he's going to be the guy who is keeping it secure on the outside, and I do really love that about him. So very excited to see what he does. It could even potentially be someone who could be used as a safety at that 5'11", 195 frame. Excited for that, but I hinted at this. Gentry Williams is awesome. He is Kobe Bryant at home. Big fan of that. I don't like to do BS comparisons, so this was one that, like, when I really feel confident, not confident, but like I would say if I don't feel moved to say an exact comp, I'm not going to. But Gentry Williams was really fun. Like, kind of the opposite of Woody Washington here. And to me, that's honestly awesome. I love that about them. That's why they work together so well. It's because you kind of have lightning and thunder there. So, again, watch that Texas game. It was one of his better graded games. But, again, this is the game. This is the game to end up doing it. And I think it was better graded because on the second play, he ended up getting a pick. So, like, that kind of artificially boosted it. So he had an interception on the second play. He's a skinny fella, but he is willing to go into the box. I said he feels like Kobe Bryant at home. He has some pretty delayed reactions to sharper cuts. He's weirdly solid in zone coverage. He literally has a half-second delay, though, when he's responding to hard cuts in man coverage. It's actually insane. Like, if somebody puts their foot in the ground and digs in, he just kind of has that Windows spinny wheel of death for half a second, and then he breaks. And it's like, he doesn't necessarily have the full recovery speed to be able to do that because that's just too much time. And that's why when he is, comfortable in zone, that's something I do love about him a lot. The fact is there is a role for him, and he's a great athlete in zone cover, like with good zone coverage ability, with good instincts and physicality. If you want to use this guy as a deep safety, you can. But I think he's actually built to be a boundary corner. And that's weird to say at 6 foot 180. He's a little bit of a skinny fella, but he is really, really solid. Somebody who I do like. And you might say, Kobe Bryant at home, that's so disrespectful. Just wait till you see Kobe Bryant's grade. Like, I love Kobe Bryant. So we'll keep it there. Maxwell Hairston is next. Y'all know me. I was the Adrian Phillips guy. Drew Phillips, he's kind of my draft crush last year. So when I see another athletic Kentucky corner, I get excited. And, you know, he's somebody that really did, like, he caught my eye, but I think there were certainly some deficiencies in his game. And let's break down his game versus Georgia. He's a feisty player, a little bit slower than needed on his change of direction, but he ended up having a good tackle after he was beaten on a route. He bit hard on the run, allowing Brock Bowers to get open. You guys can end up seeing that. That was like one of the highlights of that game. It's pretty obvious to find it. He has a really solid top speed. He needs to get his head around and go for the ball when he's not in a bad spot. So basically, go for the ball, bro. Go for the balls. Do not focus on just going for the receiver. The ball is the key. He ended up being toasted by Ladd McConkey in off-man coverage, like a lot of people do. He does have blinders. Oh, almost like that instinct's grade is a D. He has issues in off-man, especially versus curls. He has a nice top speed that he ended up displaying on an interception return as well. He whiffed on a couple of tackles, but he does get frustrated with himself. That's a big plus for me. If you just whiff tackles and you're just like, whatever, I'm going to knock you down. But self-accountability is key, and he certainly holds himself to a higher regard. Big fan of that. He's really lacking in terms of looking for the ball. It does seem like he does not know when the ball is coming. So bottom line, he's somebody where if you want to use him in a press man situation, this guy's going to be an absolute king for you. He needs to add a little bit more weight to his frame, but luckily he has the athleticism base to maybe lose a little bit to gain a little bit. And, you know, to me, that's really damn solid. He's a little bit uncomfortable in zone. I mean, if you see a C zone grade, essentially, it's guys who can stand and cover their zone if need be, but at the same time, they're not actually being extremely fluid and properly processing what's going on. But Maxwell Hairston is solid corner. I mean, to me, I think it's someone who you easily should be developing. I think he can definitely get some reps in there, and I will be putting out some content on, you know, scheme-specific grades, because I do have those for a lot of the positions now. And that's going to be a cool one because it's going to be not like this necessarily. It's going to be a little bit more list format, but it will be essentially tying back to these videos and basically showing a reweight based on different systems. And I'm going to use those weighted scales or those shifted scales to be able to build a team-specific draft boards. Super excited for that, by the way. But let's talk about Daylen Everett next. This is the Georgia corner that nobody's probably ever heard of. I didn't hear of him. Like, I'm so focused on all these other Georgia DBs. You got Malachi Starks in there, you know? Like, these are guys that are going to command a little bit more attention. Kamari Lassiter. Daylen Everett did not get a ton of love, but he should. He's a really good player. And let's look at his game versus Missouri because, you know, you're going to be playing against some really, like, Missouri receivers are very underrated. Not talking about Luther Burden. I'm talking about guys like Theo Weiss. Like, those guys are really good. So, based on my notes for against Missouri, this is what I ended up seeing. His acceleration has been one of his small issues because receivers ended up getting micro separation. Basically, at the end of their route, I saw Luther Burden, I think, catch a touchdown on Daylen. They ended up basically getting a little bit more juice, and he wasn't able to match that increase of athleticism towards the end of a rep. And that's what made Jamar Chase special to me, is that micro separation. And I'm really hoping that, you know, I ended up seeing a couple times with receivers, they end up getting that micro separation. Quarterbacks are pinpointing the NFL. That could end up being his downfall, but it is a good thing to at least be having a complaint about micro separation rather than macro separation. He ended up getting beat by a flag route. A lot of guys do. It's a pretty complicated route for college. Not many offenses use it effectively. He's overall been quite solid, just not really noteworthy. He's shown zero ball skills so far. He does have nice physicality. My God, dude, just get your head around. You're doing a good job besides that. Interesting. It's like deja vu. A lot of these corners, unfortunately, they just don't go for the ball. His zone skills are underwhelming. Press man is extremely good. Off man, not so much. So he is so unnoteworthy that his notes are boring to me to read. So I'm sure they're even worse for you to hear. The bottom line is you just watch him. He's a damn good corner. He's going to be a little bit more scheme specific. I think that a team even like the Packers, who like to use press man now because they're coach from BC, their defense coordinator from Boston College loves press man. Like, that's a little bit more up his alley. Was it one of the dream fits? No. Should have been. Oops. Probably. But regardless, again, I have those in there more for fun than anything. It's not necessarily supposed to be something that's extremely deep. Like every team can use a corner, but it's just kind of those spots where based on where they're picking, I could see the team going for one of them. But pick 13, spot 13, we got Damani Jackson, USC transfer to Alabama. That's a very, very nice transition there. And, you know, I know it's not Saban there anymore, but Washington has had some good corners too back in DeBoer's time. So, you know, let's not try to crap on how good this corner certainly could be. But Damani Jackson, you know, USC's top cornerback, 5-star player. Let's look at his game versus Washington because I think it's key to watch him versus three top 100 players in the 2024 NFL draft based on their pick selection. But Damani Jackson versus Washington. He has a very quick bailout. He's willing to go into the box. He's a very explosive athlete. He overcommitted on pushing the run inside, leading to effectively doing nothing, but he wanted to do the right thing. Essentially, he just got a little too excited to play the run and ended up letting it bounce outside of him, and that's not really what you need to do. But regardless, I digress. He might have slipped up on who to cover, but he still was able to self-correct and rebound to make a touchdown-saving tackle. Do remember that rep. That was it was both heartbreaking as well as gives me a lot of hope for his mental ability to rebound. He's sticky in coverage. He tried to do a pass breakup, did not, but he ended up not getting it. It was a good catch in traffic by Jalen Polk. Would like for him to change direction on a hard stop slightly better because it looks like he stopped well, but he did not get himself into proper position in time. Something I did notice about him, essentially, like he would stop and then it would take him a second to get that, like stop the inertia backwards to be able to change that direction. But again, super minute. We're just talking about versus like first and second round receivers here. But regardless, let me see. Let me catch up to where I was. I don't know if this was by design, but he just locked down a double move by not biting on the first cut. So that's not, I didn't see very many double cuts when I was watching his tape. So that's something that's like TBD, but it's pretty cool to see. At least he didn't end up getting fooled by it. He's not super fluid. He has some little chops in there, but he still moves extremely well. It's just not picturesque. And I think that's key. A lot of guys like move and it's just unbelievably fluid. Talking about Ricardo Hallman here, it's just almost like a work of art. It really does look like a potential figure skater, you know, doing their own movement skills. Damani's a little bit more choppy in the legs. It still ends up working, which I do love, but it's not the same as just watching someone look like they're gliding. It's just, there's something beautiful about it. Anyways, he might have been slow, or he's been slow to identify runs, but he ended up throwing Jalen Polk to the ground, which I am always in support of. Definitely does not have a great feel in zone. He missed press on his press rep on Odunze. He'll be a man corner until he develops more field awareness. So bottom line, elite movement skills. A little bit on the choppy side because it's not like super fluid, but still fluid enough, definitely. And it's an athlete with high man coverage ability. Like, that's really, really key. If I could see anybody going top 32, like first round, out of this back group, it's easily Damani Jackson. Him, then Dalen Everett would be next. Let's talk about Quincy Riley. People are going to get their feathers riled up here, but I love Quincy Riley. I do. They're not going to get their feathers ruffled because I like Quincy Riley. They're going to get their feathers ruffled because Quincy Riley has a cult following. Like, people love him so much that they're saying he's the best corner in the class. And I am here to say that that is not the case as much as I want him to be the best corner in the class because I love Louisville players. I just do. But let's look at his notes versus Florida State. Oh, interesting how ACC corners randomly get graded versus Clemson and Florida State. Because those are just the games that A, are available, but B, more importantly, are versus high-end talent. So it's one of his better, ended up being one of his better graded games. His change of direction is a bit stiff. He's not bad overall. He's just a bit stiff. He has really solid zone instincts. His top speed does seem to be a little bit limited. He got blown by Keon Coleman and did not recover in time to make a play. I do love his tenacity and willingness to put himself on the line. He's just like a rocket, man. He's willing to be able to get crushed in order to make the play. He identified an open receiver and he's left his zone to cover him when playing quarterback. Or when the quarterback, where the hell did the word plague come from in that? Jeepers. He identified an open receiver and he's left his zone to cover him when the quarterback was not in range of this guy. Very smart move. So essentially, Travis was aiming at the other side of the field. Essentially, he bailed his own zone to cover another player that was essentially uncovered. And he basically was like, oh, well, the quarterback's not going to be throwing to my side. He's not looking my side. He's shifted away from my side. So it just doesn't really make sense and he'd have the ability to recover. So I love the fact that he was comfortable enough processing the effective range of the field. That's awesome. That's why he has an A in instincts. That's pretty freaking awesome. I digress though. He needs to keep his head in the game. He correctly guessed a double move, but he kept drifting and got beat by a comeback. That was in zone coverage. It did kind of bum me out to see that because he just didn't remain active that play. I just don't see the explosiveness out of his break that I would like to see for 185 pounds. He's now listed at 195, so I don't know if that's going to get better. He ended up calling out a safety for bailing on a cover to on his deep zone and ended up covering for him. And then this play I ended up getting actually like 200 likes on Twitter, which is kind of crazy because I didn't know there was a cult following at the time. But he ended up identifying the screen. And before it was even developing, it ended up just crushing the receiver. So big fan of Quincy. He's an enforcer. I mean, it's just, he's not going to be your high-end athlete. And you're going to want to use him in a zone system because he's smart as hell. You could even use him as a box safety if you need to. Like, he's just that good at being physical and smart. Again, two foundations that I think the best corners all have is being able to process the play and being able to handle some physicality, and he has that. So someone who I really, really like, he's ended up being in my top, he's easily in my top 64. So keep that in mind as well. I think he's in my top 40. But looking at Jason Marshall Jr. next, I'm going to, again, keep this a little bit shorter because this was part of the first video. But the bottom line is the big mess up that Jason Marshall did in his game versus LSU that ended up actually giving me faith in him was Brian Thomas blew right by him. Like, he ended up messing up. Brian Thomas blew right by him. And Jason Marshall was able to recover and make the tackle. So I love that recovery ability. He's quick twitch. He actually is able to process the field properly. He's a very balanced corner. And at 6'1", 205, I think he gets one of the worst raps in all of college in terms of scouting. Like, he's someone who is just extremely reliable. He's just not good versus the run. Like, he has the blinders on. And that's okay. I mean, not every corner needs to be incredible. So I think that there certainly is a world where Jason Marshall is an absolute stud in the NFL. He's literally a quarter point away from being a starter for me because I think he just needs to be slightly more viable in his run support, and that's easily something he can do. These grades are based on the player right now, not what they are, because I also do love seeing the journey rather than just pulling projections out of my ass. That's just not how I roll here. But continuing on, let's talk about Tacario Davis. Again, one of the ones I'm going to keep relatively shorter. We're already over 45 minutes in here. Like, don't want this to be a billion-minute video, and we've literally already broken down these guys in more depth. But regardless, what I do love about Tacario, because I'm a sucker for these Arizona corners. He was part of my way too early 2025 mock because I just really love these Arizona guys. Price Sock, Tacario Davis, like, they were great. Elite corner duo. Kind of complimentary, but I digress. Tacario, his one thing that, like, it's an interesting battle is the fact that he's so smart, but he just doesn't have the physical capacity to make everything, like, make it actually as productive as it should be. And the crazy part is he's very, very productive. This is a guy with a lot of pass breakups, with a lot of interceptions. Like, well, I'm forgetting off the top of my head how many, but he's just able to get himself in the right position because he is 6'4". It's kind of hard to change directions when you're 6'4". I get it. But at the same time, he does have that length to at least be able to make up for it. He reacts properly, and he has the length to make up for the fact that he has a hard time changing direction. My big issue with him, and technically that should be yellow. All right, there's my one mess up of the video. The 74.75 should be yellow. But my one issue is the fact that NFL receivers take advantage of corners who are stiff. And I'm hoping that he's able to end up changing a little bit in terms of, you know, being a little bit more fluid. But I have seen some notes of some people classifying him as a safety, and I'm not against that. Like, he has solid top-end speed. He's extremely smart. Why not use him as a safety? 6'4", good ball skills. Like, that is, to me, someone who could be a true defensive back to be able to lurk over the deep middle. So definitely something to keep in mind, but corners usually do have a little bit more value. I don't know, though. He's a really, really good player, and I have a lot of respect for him. I just think he's really hampered by the fact that he has a hard time shifting from north to south and from east to west. We'll talk about Jabbar Muhammad next. Again, if you guys cannot tell, I changed my grading scale. Again, I don't want to give players unnecessary boosts. And also, I saw a lot of my corner grades were like boosted to the point where guys who I thought should have been fringe players were like listed as starters. But these are the guys who can actually start. And Jabbar should potentially be a slot, but he does have a little bit of that, Jair Alexander to him. He's a little bit shorter. He's a feisty player. That's what the grades are going to be. But he has those blinders, really does, and that does affect him in zone coverage. He covers the guy in his zone very well, but when there's somebody who's going to be crossing over the field into his zone, I just don't see him picking up the player and processing it very, very well. So that is my little issue with Jabbar Muhammad. But I love the fact that he's an extremely high IQ player. He's someone that, like, in terms of being able to process what he is supposed to do and not basically be the holistic corner that maybe you want him to be, he's unbelievably fluid. And it's just, you really have to keep him more in a press, lock on your dude scenario and kind of manage your risk around what happens if there is a run play. Just pray to God, or like maybe you can just maybe have the heavier safety on his side on more run specific downs. Or, for plays where you want him to go into zone coverage, maybe have him in that quarter system to where he doesn't necessarily have as much territory to have to process watching players to go in and out. So there's certainly a process to it, but if you use him correctly, this guy's one of the best corners in the class. And I do love that about him. I think he'd easily be a starter in a system that values his skill set more. And certainly something that I'm going to be intrigued with watching going forward. Kobe Bryant's next. Technically, they're the same grade, but who cares? Kobe did get a -4. Yeah. Ricardo got a -5 because he has some lazy reps. But Kobe, I mean, you're 170. He ends up hitting like a Mack truck, which doesn't make sense to me, but I just have a hard time believing that this guy, as talented as he is going to work in the NFL in terms of being there every single down. So I got to nerf him a little bit, even though he's still corner 2. He would have theoretically been pushing for that corner 1 spot. I think he's awesome. I really do. I've never seen a corner mask their size with so much power. Like, there is a full-on highlight reel of this dude just destroying receivers. So I do love that about him. He's someone who can easily fly. I definitely know I watched his game versus Texas. And, it's just somebody that really does bring the speed to the table. And his change of direction for that speed, that's pretty damn solid. I mean, being able to be a good player in terms of change of direction while not going to be able to be beat deep, that's super critical. And being balanced in both man and zone coverage is great as well. That's why I ended up saying Kobe Bryant at home for Gentry Williams. Like, this dude who looks like a pure man corner is actually processing the game really well in zone. So I think there's something really special about Kobe Bryant. He's not going to be drafted very high, I assume, because of his size and based on what happened with Emmanuel Forbes. But like, this is Emmanuel Forbes if Emmanuel Forbes had the physical profile of a 190-pound corner. And that's awesome. I really do love Kobe Bryant. I've nerfed him quite a bit, but this is going to be someone who I hitch my wagon to. I really do like his game. Then we'll talk about Denzel Burke. Mr. Great at everything. Like, honestly, this guy doesn't do anything poorly at all. And, for me, when you end up watching Denzel Burke play, you get to see him get better every year. He had some sophomore slump, but even if you look at that year on its own, you'll see him struggle at the beginning and just get better and better and better. And versus Michigan, like, he ended up really being arguably the best defender on the field. I say arguably because there is somebody else we'll talk about on this list. But Denzel Burke is phenomenal. There's nothing that's wrong with his game. He's not going to be your best corner in any single statistic. Like, if you're looking at your draft board, there are going to be 1, 2, maybe 3 corners better in every single statistic. But you will have a hard time finding somebody who will fit every single system as well as Denzel Burke. Someone who can lock down double moves by double move route specialists. And that's why he has a B+ man coverage. He's somebody that can process a zone coverage really well because he can feel plays developing around him. But maybe he's not going to be some guy who is a Sebastian Castro and just actually pretty much defend 3 players at once. But he is somebody who could end up defending 2. He could defend one guy and watch another guy come into the system or come into his zone and end up being able to recognize the quarterback shifting his attention and not making a play on that. So Denzel Burke is literally the king of balance. And the only issue is he's dealt with some injuries. Pretty sure he had a finger injury. He had, I think, an ankle injury as well. Might have been a shoulder on top of that. So he's just had a little bit of some ringy-dingies that have slowed him down a little bit. But, on the field, this guy's phenomenal. Big fan of his game. But Travis Hunter is next. Feathers have been ruffled, but you cannot lie that the fact that this dude, A, doesn't put 100% effort into every single play, but he also plays 100 reps a game. So I wanted to balance those out. There's a rep versus Tetero McMillan that I really didn't appreciate because he just didn't even go up to contest the ball. This guy has wide receiver hands, and he just doesn't go up to contest the ball versus T-Mac in the red zone. And it's like, you cannot be defeated like that. And he just ended up walking it off. And it's like, for maybe that's the right move. But for me, if I'm looking at a player that I want to draft, I want someone who is like Maxwell Hairston getting pissed at himself. And Maxwell Hairston's 9 spots below this. So, again, I know the talent's far superior to Travis Hunter, but the mentality is far superior for Maxwell Hairston. I digress. This dude is very high IQ when you put him in zone coverage. He feels everything that's going on around him. Now, I don't think he always gets it correct, but he's also super young. And this is something where his instincts could go to an A-. His zone coverage could go to an A very easily as his year progresses and as he gets more seasoned. But this is somebody that I don't think is as good of an athlete as people think. There's a reason he got absolutely destroyed by T-Mac, and that's because I don't think his ball skills in terms of going up and contesting a receiver for it is as good as he is for a receiver contesting a defensive back, which I was hoping that the mentality would perfectly switch. Like, this is the guy to have it switch. I just didn't see that. But also, you end up seeing Alek Ayumanor just destroy this guy. Like, absolute toast fest. And that was a bigger bodied receiver who ended up having a lot of deep speed, and Travis got exposed for it. So just don't put him in those situations, and you're going to have an absolute superstar. So a big fan of Travis Hunter. It's just, again, he's also 185, and he looks like he's playing down in the 175 to 180 range. Definitely worrisome there, but the talent is undeniable, and again, the foundation is where it needs to be. Azariah Thomas is at my cornerback 5 spot. He didn't even start. I don't even think he started a game last year, but he definitely did not start for the entire year. But there was a lot of reps. Florida State did a good job at this. They had a really good rotation to where he was getting essentially flex starting reps at the beginning of games. And Azariah continued to pop off as arguably the best defensive back on the entire field. And we're talking about Renardo Green, who I had as a 76 grade. So, I definitely loved Azariah Thomas. He's a freak athlete. He's somebody that is going to be super sticky, and he's a little bit too grabby. I do say that, but he's super young as well. He is, if I'm not mistaken, the cousin of Azariah Thomas. That's his name, Wanya Thomas. And that's, again, pretty damn cool. Got that NFL lineage right there. But he has an elite frame, 6'2", 194. He's just so inexperienced, and I'm really hoping to see him grow and develop. But the player I saw on the field was somebody that I wanted every single down on my team. Just a freak build, great athlete, great movement skills, and great reaction timing. It's just, when you're young as a corner, I don't think you grow to appreciate the ability to be a holistic corner. And that's why his instincts and run support are a little lower, because he's more focused on the coverage rep rather than the other parts of it. Now let's talk about Ephesians Prysock. Former Arizona corner, former duo with Tacario Davis, followed his coach up there to Washington. And, this guy is just the definition of good. Like, as top speed's capped a little bit, you can see it on certain reps where receivers are generating some separation at higher end speeds. But he's someone who I did have listed as a hybrid, could end up moving into the slot because of the fact that he's very fluid and he is explosive in short range. He knows how to get his claws on you. He knows how to be able to seal the edge and be able to play the run very well. And to me, that's great. I mean, he's somebody that, again, the only issue is the fact that you don't want this guy in a one-on-one race with Tyreek Hill or Xavier Worthy. And I don't think many NFL teams are going to have Ephesians Prysock as 6'4". I don't think they're going to have him in one-on-one coverage versus those guys. Look at that frame, 6'4", 190. And he's explosive, and he's great in both man and zone, and he can help out versus the run. Could even be a safety. So, super flexible defensive back. A lot of people say, a failing corner, let's put him to safety. No. That's for somebody who you just want to keep on the roster as a safety. I'm talking about someone who could be a game changer as a safety. So you got a great frame there. You got somebody who's very well balanced in everything, and he's somebody in short range will be a very dangerous threat. So I'm very excited for that. Really, really fun player to watch. But nonetheless, going to Washington, following his coach, is going to be a really cool thing to see how it evolves as he plays there for Washington. This is the other Ohio State player I'm talking about. And if you can't tell, I think the top 11 are all the same. So the additional 14 corners basically ended up taking, 14 out of the last 16 spots. But, that's kind of what I was hoping for. I sometimes like having a guy who pops up in the top 5. But, the top guys, luckily, have been the top guys. We haven't been talking about pretty much scrubs, which is great. But Davison Igbinison, I did not think I was going to like this guy. But every time I put on the tape for Ohio State, this guy is the best corner on the field. This is the guy is the best player, arguably, on the field for their defense. Just genuinely watching him, he's not somebody who's going to be an impact player on that first down and, you see a Najee Harris running on the outside. This is not the dude, even though he's pretty damn solid frame-wise, 6'2", 193. He's not somebody who I'm going to use as an enforcer. But I will let him absolutely destroy the receiver he's up against. He's not going to be someone who I could see going toe-to-toe with Najee, but I could see him going toe-to-toe with George Pickens in a block versus just shove battle, and that would be beautiful. He lands his hands properly. He's a fluid athlete. It's just so interesting to see how polished Igbinison and Denzel Burke are, because Ohio State used to be DBU, same thing with LSU, and I just haven't really shown enough respect for Ohio State recently. I've been looking at the DBs they have, and I'm very, very impressed. So Davison Igbinison, honestly, one of the biggest surprises that I watched. I just threw him in there initially as the top guys, just, because, hey, it's another Ohio State corner. And I'm very grateful I did, because there's just nothing this guy can't do. He's someone who pops off every time. It passed the eye test when I was watching Jordan Hancock, as well as Lathan Ransom. So for me, when my eyes are attracted to a player when I'm not trying to watch them, that kind of shows me that what I watched actually lines up with what I actually watched. So I love that about him. He's a great player. I think he's going to be a stud, but let's talk about the top guys. Ben Morrison, there's nothing this guy does really wrong. There really isn't. He's a little physical. I love it. A little too grabby, but who cares? That's what the top DBs do anymore. And it's not stupid. He doesn't do it in a stupid manner. There's certain corners that just grab because, they are trying to cover up for the fact they don't have the acceleration or the speed. And Ben Morrison doesn't have that issue. I mean, he and Cam Hart dealt with the Ohio State receivers extremely well. And he is a top-tier corner. He will be a corner 1 on our roster. He should be a corner 1 on the roster, I should say. There are certain situations where there's a blue-chip corner there, and they're going to have pretty much 2 corner 1s starting. That's how you build a no-fly zone. But regardless, Ben Morrison doesn't have the most elite frame, 6', 185. Not great. But I do see that there's something absolutely amazing to Ben Morrison's game, and that's the fact that he's very well balanced, and he's very comfortable in the player that he is. He's very patient as well, and I think that there's no system that he can't fit. So this is somebody who is my number 2 player in the class. I love him to death, but there's only one player on earth that could beat up Ben Morrison based on my grading scale so far. And that's Will Johnson. I actually lied. His grade is a 93. So keep that in mind. Actually, no, it's not. It is an 8. It's a 91. I'm forgetting. I have a corner ones boosted on my board scale. So it's effectively a 93. But who gives a shit? He's already 10 points above number 2, right? He is just unreal. And if you guys are wondering like why certain A's turn to A minuses and stuff, I ended up basically changing 15 to 20 point category, and I just left it as is. I ended up having like basically based on a 20 point scale, maybe something that was an A grade for a 15 might end up just be listed as an A minus. But who cares? This guy is unbelievable in everything. He just didn't have elite ball production because no one wants to target a completely locked up receiver. I do think Will Johnson's the best player I've ever studied. Like I've only been officially grading players for a couple of years now, so keep that caveat. But you know, Will Johnson and Sauce Gardner give each other a run for their money, and Will Johnson is he's special. He plays everywhere. I could give him a +5 in it factor if I wanted to. It just doesn't matter. Like I just don't think that there's anybody that I've ever studied who comes close to the consistency and to the freakishness that Will Johnson brings to the table. And he's 6'2", 202 pounds. It's not like he's 6 foot 170. This ain't Kobe Bryant. This is somebody who is genuinely special. And I am so happy for the fact that this guy exists for this year, because I think that there is just, watch him. The Ben Morrison fans who are going to get bummed out about this, just watch Will. I mean, you could pull up the stats. I ended up watching the games where he gets exposed the most, and he's still unbelievable. Like, that's the type of player that you want. So I'm going to leave the video there. Thank you so much for watching, enjoying this with me for over an hour long. You guys are special to me. Happy 11/11 video. I love you. See you on the far side.